light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. Today I wanted to take a little time to reflect on the word see, but used as a question, that when somebody says see, meaning do you see what I'm communicating? Do you see what I'm pointing at? Do you see what you're looking at? There's this wonderfully poetic, challenging phrase, and I don't know if I'm going to quote it exactly right, but I quote it right according to which translation, I guess. In the Bible, where it says something about let the one who has eyes to see, be able to see. The idea being that it's not just a question of having physical eyes. I mean, there may be blind people, there may be people who are blind physically who can see things that people who have no visual impairment are unable to see. In terms of see meaning understand, or see meaning perceive. I met a young man in a Martin Luther King parade once who was blind and was using a white cane to find his way down the street. And he had actually so finely tuned his ears that he could tap the pavement with his white stick, his cane, and by the sound of the tapping, he could tell where the parked cars were as we're walking down the street, so that he didn't need anyone to tell him to walk around a car, because he could hear a difference in the sound as he was tapping his cane in front of him, so he knew where the parked cars were, and he never walked into any of them. He was perceiving in a way that would have taken me weeks, I suppose, months maybe, before I could have duplicated what he was doing. So who was the one with the disability, him or me? Actually, in that case, neither one of us was disabled. I used my eyes, he used his ears, but we both got done what we needed to. But the question of seeing goes so much beyond our physical eyes. There are times when we see with our hearts what is needed within the situation. When sometimes we see with our memories, because past experiences of a particular challenge tell us what needs to happen in a current challenge. Maybe we went through something in the past and now we happen to be present while someone else is going through something similar, and they don't know that we have that memory. They don't know that we have that perceptive ability, that because of our memory we can see what the situation needs, where they can't because they've never been through this before. Bringing all of that to the intermingling of the material world and the spiritual world, in the way we live our lives, that we are physical and spiritual, as well as mental and psychological and emotional and other dimensions also. But in one of the challenges to being a person of faith is how much faith relies upon what cannot be seen. And yet it's so pervasive, because the visible is always affected by the invisible. Whether you're talking about the sail on a boat being blown by the invisible wind, or whether you're talking about the unpredictabilities of weather or the calendar year, that there's something about the passage of time that affects things too in ways that are never, that are often not particularly obvious. So we have, that's where we're, well, as I put it on this one bookmark I made, it says, faith ventures where reason cannot. That by faith we're able to attempt things and do things and challenge things that we wouldn't otherwise be able to. And those without faith, and I'm sure we all know people like that, seem imprisoned by their own cynicism and skepticism, and to have enormous difficulty participating in loving relationships or encouraging the best of life to come to them. In any case, as I was pondering this whole challenge of seeing and perceiving and having faith, and how pervasive it is, that even when everything goes wrong, I still find myself unable to question that God is still there. And when I least expect it, in defiance of all probability and statistics, things will frequently go in a most incredible direction. The blessing I have longed for, wished for, prayed for, wanted, needed, always seems just out of reach, and the moment that I give up and turn around and turn my attention to other things, it's like trying to catch a butterfly. It flutters all over the field, and you chase it, you cannot catch that silly butterfly. And it's not even moving very fast. It's just floating around in the air, trying to catch the butterfly, and somehow I can never quite catch it. And I stop for a moment and turn my attention elsewhere, and the butterfly lands on my hand. It comes to me instead of me coming to it. And it seems to me there are a great many things in life that, like catching a butterfly, we have to be able to see them, and then we have to patiently wait for them. We have to see that they will not come to us if we pursue them directly. They will only come when we are open, when we are listening, when we are quiet and still, instead of when we are aggressively trying to entrap them. But going back to this thing about probability and statistics, that when I thought there was no way out of a particular situation, and suddenly in the 11th hour, somehow God seems to have a mischievous delight in waiting till the 11th hour, that suddenly this answer shows up that nobody would have guessed. Kind of like the story in the Bible of the Egyptian armies chasing the Israelites to the Red Sea, and they're trapped, and they're doomed, and they're all about to die, and suddenly the Red Sea parts, and they walk through, or so the story goes. And of course, on this note that we're discussing at the moment, I would have looked up and said, and why did you have to wait until the army was 500 yards away and we were all in danger? I mean, you could have done this last night, and we could have just moved through leisurely. But no, you have to wait till the 11th hour, when, if the answer doesn't come now, we are absolutely toast. And time again, in the 11th hour, in defiance of all probability and statistics, something goes wondrously right. Somebody shows up, a new opportunity comes, and everything's fine. Sometimes. Because there have been other times where I was looking for my 11th hour deliverance, because I had done everything I could do. I had adapted in every way I could. I had used all my resources, and there simply wasn't enough left. And sometimes the answer didn't come. And it wasn't that I was killed by an attacking army, but I did suffer some significant loss. And trying to come to terms with that loss, and understanding that even the experience of loss, coming to see, if you will, that even the experience of loss was inadequate to eradicate the existence of God. That even in my experience of loss, God was still there. And as much as I would be tempted to say, and why didn't you do anything? And sometimes I do say, why didn't you do anything? Often I don't get an answer. Sometimes they do, but often I don't. And yet, in that moment, finally come to a place where I could see that, it doesn't really matter what happens to me. God is still God. No matter what people say about God or expect of God, God is still God. But the thing I have to remember is that God is beyond human comprehension, and that there's more mystery in dealing with the mystical than there are answers and certainties and rules. It's not about rules and certainties and answers. It's about having a relationship of love with divine mystery. On that note, as I was creating my second album of original songs, dealing with mysteries and coexisting with all the questions, and how we're always in process, and yet somehow, even when I have to experience loss, even when I have to do the grieving for reasons I don't fully understand at the time, often I understand later, but as they say, hindsight is 20/20. When you look back, you can understand why, but at the time you're in the midst of it, you do your best to get through it and to deal with it however you can, and trust that if it needs to be different, God has the ability to move things in a different direction. And if God chooses not to, be sure there was a good reason. We just don't happen to know what it is at the moment. And I'm not saying that to be glib or to say that difficulties aren't painful. I'm saying that to remind us all, to remind me as well, that if, to use the overused trite line, when God closes one door, he always opens another window or another door someplace else. That difficulties can sometimes serve as a kind of guidance, that if this door closes, maybe that wasn't the right door. But it certainly looked good, but maybe it wasn't the right door. Hindsight is 20/20. 20 years from now, maybe we'll understand why, and we'll be glad that it didn't work out that way. But often we're standing too close to our own situation. And so that's where being a person of faith has to do with being willing to trust divine mystery. So, a song I entitled Holy Mystery. I walk alone, and you are always with me. I struggle hard, and your peace fills my heart. I do my best, but to limits must surrender. And then it is you play a triumph song. I am surrounded by holy mystery. I live in awe of who you are. Your whispers and your gentle touch, your wisdom and your guiding love, everywhere and always, are enough for me. Countless names which have marched through time before me, their trail I see, and my own is thus made known. A million unseen hands and silent voices singing. I'm not alone if I but have the eyes to see. I am surrounded by holy mystery. I live in awe of who you are. Your whispers and your gentle touch, your wisdom and your guiding love, everywhere and always, are enough for me. Your spirit flows through all I see around me. Your wisdom shines in the riddles of my days. Your loving hand directs my nighttime vision. Your beating heart sets the rhythm of my song. I am surrounded by Your whispers and your gentle touch, your wisdom and your guiding love, everywhere and always, are enough for me. When skies of blue by dark clouds are covered, when falling rain keeps sunbeams from the ground, when a heavy heart prevents my feet from dancing, your spirit's wings can even then be found. I am surrounded by holy mystery. I live in awe of who you are. Your whispers and your gentle touch, your wisdom and your guiding love, everywhere and always, are enough for me. Whether blinding snow or deep of night assails me, in reverent silence or resounding song, in patient stillness or in jubilation, hand in hand we smile and journey on. I am surrounded by holy mystery. I live in awe of who you are. Your whispers and your gentle touch, your wisdom and your guiding love, everywhere and always, are enough for me. Everywhere and always, you are enough for me. A lot of my personal and spiritual growth continues to happen through noticing what's around me, through looking at the faith and the spiritual walk of others and what is manifest in creation, and in seeing that when I was a kid they told me I was really good at figuring things out when it came to fixing things or assembling things, and I concocted this response. I never heard anybody say it, I just figured it out for myself, I guess. If you stare at anything long enough, you'll figure out how it works. And very often that was all I did. I would stare at something until I saw how the shapes meshed and matched and corresponded. And I would figure out, well, if, kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, if a hole is that shape and extension is that shape, then that means the two could go together. In a similar sort of way, I guess, I frequently meet people whose only conception of God comes from institutionalized religion. And many examples of institutionalized religion have been very disappointing throughout human history. And that's putting it mildly. The important thing to me, I guess, is to look beyond all of that and see if, even just a moment here or there, if you can see God's shadow passing by, or God's fingertip moving in some magical way in creation or in the unfolding of your life or something. Any sort of thing like that. And a brilliant sunset, of course, is one of the more common metaphorical examples. Look at what God painted. All of that being the case, as I was pondering that, what do experiences of God all have in common? And I was reminded of the scene in the movie Contact, starring Jodie Foster, in which she gets this glimpse of the universe and is just saturated by awe. She looks at it and mumbles, "I didn't know it was so beautiful," and there are no words that can describe this. It is so beautiful. And in the movie, she's playing a scientist who is self-described as an atheist. And yet it seems to me that when we experience that kind of awe, that may be God. And that extreme of beauty and love and wisdom and something so beyond us that the only word that comes to mind is wow. And it is so woefully inadequate to describe or to respond to what it is we're perceiving in that moment. You know, that I think it allowing for metaphorical and poetic interpretation when we have experiences of awe that strip us of all narcissism and selfishness and self-centeredness and self-preoccupation, we may be in the presence of God, and in that moment to sit quietly and to listen and to see what that moment will teach us, to see what will appear, to see what that which is truly God will do with our openness and our attentiveness in that moment. You know, in the movie Contact, the scientist played by Jodie Foster essentially comes back to saying, "I cannot deny what I perceived. Everything in me screams that it's true, and I have absolutely no way of explaining it or proving it scientifically." And I would say, yeah, that sounds like God. Not at all bound by human thinking or human theology or human scientific principles. And yet, the more we learn, the more we understand how God isn't breaking any of God's rules, but God's rules may not be the same as the human rules that have been ascribed to God. The challenge, I suppose, is to see God beyond all the religions, beyond all the theology, to see that divine embodiment of highest wisdom and greatest love that existed before the first human being ever did. And, obviously I'm getting into some theological assumptions here. I think, I offer these to you as the way I perceive, as the way a lot of people perceive. I offer it as your food for thought. You don't have to believe anything just because I do. You don't have to agree with anything I say. If you want to be a guest on the show and explain how things look from where you stand, I welcome the opportunity. Please feel free to contact me through any of the means identified in the closing credits of the show. But my point, I guess, is in speaking with friends of various faiths, Muslim, Christian, atheist, New Age, pagan, some of each of them, and some who claim no belief system at all, have described what might be labeled experiences of God, where they were so encompassed by awe and so unable to explain what happened and why they felt the way they did, and how, like Jodie Foster in the movie, the recognition that this experience has changed me forever and I can never be the same again. That something about that experience of awe changes the way we see ourselves, the way we see others, the way we see the world in which we live. The perfection, the beauty, the majesty, the power, any number of things might create that awe, but in that moment there is no narcissistic selfishness to perceive anymore. We have been so enveloped by the awe and by perception looking outward that it's, there's a reason our eyes were fitted in our body looking outward, not looking in at our own brains, at the darkness behind the eyeballs. that cannot be seen until you bring light into the space. There's no light in there. You have to bring it in. We were given eyes to look at what's around us, and rather than to only look at what's within us. And in that, to find relationships and to see the relationship we have with each other, with those who are completely opposite from us. That regardless of religious differences, of theological differences, of sociological differences, of economic differences, that the rich should be able to see the poor, and the poor should be able to see the rich. And we should all have the power still to come back to that point of saying a person is a person is a person is a person. And to realize that the first act of love everybody needs is to be seen. And so sometimes the most loving thing we can say to someone, but only if it's really true, is that I am able to see you. I see what you're getting at. I see what you're trying to describe, or I think I see what it is you're trying to tell me. That means you've been listening, and it means that there is a possibility of a mutually empowering relationship.